kill myself if Portugal doesn't win.
It's hard to believe this used to be an internment camp.
Over 800 episodes deep, and The Simpsons keeps predicting the future like it has inside information.
Wake up, everybody! It's World War III!
From futuristic gadgets to shocking political moments, the show has made jokes that later became real. Some people chalk it up to the Illuminati. Others call it pure coincidence. But whatever you believe, it is 2026. The World Cup has returned to North America, and this yellow family may have already shown us exactly how it ends.
This match will determine once and for all which nation is the greatest on Earth, Mexico or Portugal.
And if it is right, this might be the year Cristiano Ronaldo finally lifts that trophy.
Ronaldo! Go!
Number 8. Donald Trump becoming president. Lisa Simpson walked into the Oval Office and said something that sounded like a wild joke at the time. America had inherited a budget crisis from President Trump. That line aired in March 2000 in an episode called Bart to the Future. Back then, Donald Trump was famous, but not as a president. He was a New York businessman, a tabloid magnate, a man known for towers, money, television, and saying things that kept his name in the news. Putting him in the White House sounded like the kind of ridiculous future only The Simpsons would even touch. In 1999, Trump had already tested the idea of running for president with the Reform Party. He talked about it publicly, formed an exploratory committee, and treated the idea like something that could happen. But to most people, it still felt more like celebrity noise than the beginning of history. That is what makes The Simpsons moment so uncomfortable. The writers saw it early. They looked at a country where fame was becoming power, where television could turn a businessman into a national figure, and they pushed the joke to its strangest possible ending. Then, 16 years later, the joke stopped being just a joke. Trump ran for president for real. At first, many people treated the campaign like a stunt. Then he kept winning. He beat experienced politicians in his own party. He survived scandals, arguments, protests, and headlines that would have ended many normal campaigns. Then, in 2016, he defeated Hillary Clinton and became the 45th President of the United States. The Simpsons had shown a future where Donald Trump had been president long before it happened in real life. And after that, it became harder for people to laugh off every strange prediction the show made. And the strange part is, the show was not only playing with politics. Years before smartwatches became normal, the show had already put one on a cartoon wrist. Number 7. Smartwatches. In 1995, The Simpsons showed Lisa looking into her future, and one small detail now feels strangely normal. Her future fiancé, Hugh, lifts his wrist and uses his watch like a phone. At the time, that was not an everyday thing. A watch was still just a watch for most people. It told time. Maybe it looked expensive. Maybe it had a tiny alarm. But it was not something people expected to use for calls, messages, maps, music, health tracking, and voice commands. Back in 1995, mobile phones were still bulky compared to what came later. Most people were not walking around with the internet in their pocket. Touchscreens were not ruling daily life. A tiny screen on your wrist that could help you talk to someone sounded more like something from a spy movie than something people would actually buy. Then the real world slowly caught up. In 2013, Samsung introduced the Galaxy Gear. It had a small screen, worked with a phone, and allowed users to make and receive calls. It could also check simple things like schedules, alarms, and weather. It was not perfect, and early smartwatches still felt awkward to many people, but the idea had arrived. Then, in 2015, Apple released the Apple Watch, and the smartwatch stopped feeling like a strange experiment. It became a normal product. People started wearing a screen on their wrist to check messages, take calls, track workouts, follow maps, pay for things, and monitor their health. A cartoon gag from 1995 became something millions of people now wear without thinking twice. And after politics and technology, the next prediction went straight into the world of media empires. Number 6. Disney buying Fox. In 1998, The Simpsons dropped one of its strangest jokes so quietly that most people could have missed it. The episode was called When You Dish Upon a Star. Homer gets pulled into the world of Hollywood celebrities, and near the end, the show cuts to the Fox studio lot. On the sign, 20th Century Fox is shown as a division of Walt Disney Company. At the time, it looked like a quick background gag. Nothing more. The episode did not stop to explain it. Nobody in the scene treated it like some huge announcement. It was just there, sitting on the screen like a joke about the future of entertainment. But that is what makes it so strange now. Back then, The Simpsons was one of Fox's biggest shows. Fox had a rougher, louder, more rebellious image than Disney. Disney was the polished family empire. Fox was the network that gave the world a cartoon family that mocked television, politics, celebrities, companies, and American life every chance it got. So the joke had a clear punchline. What if even Fox, the home of The Simpsons, eventually got swallowed by Disney? For years, it stayed funny because it sounded ridiculous. Then the real world moved in the same direction. In 2019, Disney completed its massive purchase of major 21st Century Fox assets. The deal was worth about $71.3 billion. Disney took control of major film and television businesses, including 20th Century Fox, FX, National Geographic, Fox's television production units, and a bigger stake in Hulu. And just like that, the old Simpsons joke became real. The same yellow family that spent decades making fun of corporate power was suddenly living under one of the biggest entertainment empires on Earth. Maybe the writers were just making a smart joke about where media was heading. Maybe they saw that giant companies always want more control, more shows, more movies, and more screens. But the final result is still hard to ignore. And after politics, technology, and media empires, the predictions stop feeling funny, because the next one is about workers being replaced by machines. Number 5. AI replacing human workers. In Them, Robot, Mr. Burns looks at the people working inside Springfield Nuclear Power Plant and sees only one thing: money being wasted. So he fires almost everyone and replaces them with robots. The machines do not ask for raises. They do not take lunch breaks. They do not get tired. They do not complain about danger. They do not question their boss. To Burns, they look like the perfect workers. Homer is left as the only human employee, but not because Burns respects him. He stays because the plant still needs one person standing there in case something goes wrong. At first, it feels like a normal Simpsons joke. A greedy boss replaces workers with machines, then acts surprised when the machines become a problem. But the real world did not need shiny metal robots walking through office doors. The replacement came in a quieter form. It came as software. Today, the machine that threatens a job may look like a chat box answering customer complaints. It may be a writing tool making ads. It may be a voice system taking calls. It may be a design tool creating images in seconds. It may be a coding assistant helping one programmer do the work that once needed a bigger team. Almost 40% of jobs worldwide are exposed to artificial intelligence. In richer countries, that number rises to about 60%. That does not mean every job disappears, but it does mean many workers now have parts of their jobs that machines can help with, copy, or take over. Another estimate says work equal to about 300 million full-time jobs could be exposed to automation. Again, that does not mean 300 million people instantly lose their jobs. The real danger is slower than that. A task disappears first, then a contractor is not renewed, then a junior role never opens, then one team is told to do more with fewer people. That is already happening. IBM said it expected to pause hiring for some roles that artificial intelligence could replace, with about 7,800 jobs affected over time. Amazon later said it would cut about 14,000 corporate jobs as it pushed harder into artificial intelligence and tried to make the company leaner. And then The Simpsons moved from AI to the world's biggest sport. And this time, the joke landed right inside football's most powerful institution. Number 4. FIFA corruption scandal. In You Don't Have to Live Like a Referee, The Simpsons took Homer into the middle of world football. Homer is asked to referee at the World Cup in Brazil after Lisa praises him as an honest man.
We need outsiders like you to come to the World Cup.
That alone is already funny because Homer Simpson being trusted with the biggest football tournament on Earth sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. But then the episode turns towards something darker. A top official from the fictional World Football Federation appears and admits that corruption has spread through the organization. He talks like the sport has been poisoned from the inside. Then, almost immediately, he is arrested. At the time, it played like a sharp joke about football power. Everyone knew the sport was huge. Everyone knew the World Cup was not just about goals, flags, and fans. It was also about money, votes, sponsors, television deals, and powerful men making decisions behind closed doors. But 1 year later, the joke looked much less like a joke. In May 2015, real football officials were getting arrested, and what came out shook FIFA to its foundation. This wasn't some referee pocketing cash in a back corridor. It wasn't a small, isolated local scandal that would blow over in a week. This was massive, built around the biggest business deals in world football. U.S. prosecutors came forward with charges against 14 people, 9 FIFA officials, and 5 sports marketing executives. We're talking racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering conspiracies. The kind of charges you associate with organized crime, not the people running the world's most popular sport. Investigators laid out a picture of football officials and business executives who had essentially turned the sport into a personal cash machine, collecting bribes and kickbacks tied to media and marketing rights for major tournaments. The money was huge. More than $150 million in bribes and kickbacks had been paid or agreed to. That money was tied to the rights around international football competitions, the kind of deals that decide who gets to sell, broadcast, and profit from the sport watched by billions of people. And the way it all cracked open made the story even more dramatic. Swiss police arrested FIFA officials at a luxury hotel in Zurich just before FIFA's annual Congress. The scandal dragged FIFA into a crisis. Sepp Blatter won another term as FIFA president shortly after the arrests, but the pressure around the organization kept growing. Days later, he said he would step down. But once the Simpsons got this close to FIFA, the next prediction became even harder to laugh off, because it moved from football politics straight onto the World Cup pitch. Number 3. Brazil losing to Germany. Brazil did not just lose to Germany in 2014. Brazil fell apart in front of the world.
One of the worst defeats in Brazil's history, at the same time, one of the biggest victories in the history of the German team.
This was a World Cup semifinal inside Brazil, with the whole country watching. Brazil had won the World Cup more times than any other nation. The fans were not just hoping for a win. They were expecting the team to protect the pride of a football nation. Then Germany scored, and scored again, and again. Before the match had even reached 30 minutes, Brazil was already 5-0 down. Millions of people were still trying to understand the second goal when the third arrived. Before the shock could settle, the fourth and fifth followed. It did not feel like a normal football match anymore. It felt like something had broken. The final score was 7-1. For Brazil, it became one of the darkest nights in World Cup history. For Germany, it became one of the most ruthless performances the tournament had ever seen. But for people who followed The Simpsons, the result carried an extra strange detail. Months before the real tournament began, The Simpsons had already taken Homer to Brazil for a World Cup episode.
I'm sure you are familiar with the World Cup, the quadrennial drama unmatched on the planet.
The episode puts Brazil and Germany on the same World Cup path, and in the cartoon, Germany beats Brazil. The episode did not get everything right. In the cartoon, Brazil loses 2-0, not 7-1. To understand why this shook people so badly, you have to understand what Brazil was carrying into that match. Brazil was hosting the World Cup for the first time since 1950. That older tournament had left a wound of its own, because Brazil lost the deciding match at home to Uruguay. For decades, that defeat lived like a ghost in Brazilian football. So when the World Cup returned to Brazil in 2014, it was not just another tournament. It felt like a chance to rewrite a painful piece of history. Brazil reached the semi-final unbeaten, but the team was already weakened before the first whistle. Neymar, the country's biggest attacking star, was out of the tournament. Thiago Silva, the captain and defensive leader, was suspended. Brazil walked into Germany without its most important forward and without the man who usually held the back line together. Still, nobody expected what happened next. Thomas Muller opened the scoring. Then Miroslav Klose scored Germany's second and became the highest scorer in World Cup history. Toni Kroos scored twice in quick succession. Sami Khedira added another before the match had even reached the half-hour mark. 5-0 inside a World Cup semi-final against Brazil, in Brazil. The second half only made the wound deeper. Andre Schürrle scored 2 more for Germany. Oscar scored late for Brazil, but by then it did not feel like consolation. The match became known in Brazil as the Mineirazo, named after the stadium where it happened. Fans cried in the stands. Players looked lost on the field. And the fact that the Simpsons had already played with that same matchup before the real disaster made the whole thing feel much harder to laugh off. But the Brazil-Germany result was only half the strange part. Before Brazil ever reached that semifinal, the show had already built its World Cup story around a Brazilian superstar who looked a little too familiar. Number 2. Neymar and El Divo. Before Germany destroyed Brazil, Brazil had already lost the player the whole country was leaning on. It happened in the quarterfinal against Colombia. Brazil was ahead, the crowd was loud, and the dream was still alive. Then Neymar jumped for the ball and Juan Camilo Zuniga drove his knee into Neymar's back. Neymar dropped to the ground. He was not wasting time. He was not acting. He was not trying to win a cheap foul. Brazil's number 10 was hurt badly, and within moments, the country's biggest star was being carried away. The injury was serious. Neymar had fractured a bone in his spine. His World Cup was over. Brazil still won 2-1, but the result was not what people remembered most. The team had reached the semifinal, but it had lost the one player who made the whole country believe something magical could still happen. Neymar had already scored 4 goals in the tournament. He was not just another forward, he was the face of Brazil's World Cup, and that is where the Simpsons connection becomes strange. In the episode You Don't Have to Live Like a Referee, Brazil also has a flashy superstar. His name is El Divo. He is talented, dramatic, famous, and treated like the player Brazil depends on. He is the kind of footballer who can change a match, but also the kind of player people accuse of going down too easily. That detail matters because Neymar had the same kind of public image around him. He was brilliant, fast, skillful, and dangerous, but he was also often mocked for exaggerating contact and falling too dramatically. So when the cartoon built its World Cup story around a Brazilian star known for drama, the comparison became hard to ignore later. Then came the injury angle. In the episode, El Divo goes down during the match, and Homer has to decide whether the Brazilian star is really hurt or just acting again. A few months later, Neymar was lying on the grass in a real World Cup match, and nobody was laughing. Then came the extra detail that made fans look again. In the episode, people later pointed to El Divo's football boots as having a Puma-style connection. At the time of the real 2014 World Cup, Neymar was not a Puma player. He was closely tied to Nike, a brand he had been connected with since he was a young star, so the Puma details seemed like nothing. Then, years later, Neymar left Nike and signed with Puma. He became one of the biggest names attached to the brand and began wearing Puma boots. It made the whole thing feel eerie, as if the Simpsons had somehow connected the injury, the semi-final loss, and the brand switch. And after all of that, the biggest question is no longer whether the Simpsons has had strange moments with football before. By now, everyone has seen enough to know it has. The real question is why one old joke about Mexico and Portugal has suddenly returned right as the 2026 World Cup is being played in North America. Number 1. The 2026 World Cup prediction. In 1997, The Simpsons showed something that now feels impossible to ignore. The family is sitting in front of the television when an advert appears for a huge football match. Not a small game. The advert sells it like the biggest match on earth, the kind of game that decides who stands above everyone else. Then the teams appear, Mexico against Portugal. At the time, it was just a joke in the episode The Cartridge Family. Now it sits right in the middle of the 2026 World Cup. The timing is what makes it feel so strange. The episode aired almost 30 years before the tournament came to North America. Back then, the idea of Mexico and Portugal meeting on the biggest football stage sounded like a random cartoon pairing. But in 2026, the pieces are no longer sitting far apart. Mexico is not just another team in this tournament, Mexico is one of the hosts. Mexico opened the tournament with a 2-0 win over South Africa. South Korea also started strong, beating Czechia 2-1. So now Group A already has tension at the top, and Mexico's next big test against South Korea has become more than just another group match. It is a fight for the cleanest route into the knockout stage. That matters because this is not the old World Cup format anymore. 2026 is the first Men's World Cup with 48 teams. There are 12 groups of 4. The top 2 teams from each group move on, and the 8 best third-place teams also survive. That creates a round of 32 before the tournament reaches the final stages people are used to. One mistake can send 2 teams toward each other too early or keep them apart until the very end. That is why the Mexico and Portugal idea feels different this time. For the old Simpsons scene to land in the biggest possible way, Mexico and Portugal cannot crash into each other early. They need to survive their groups, avoid the wrong side of the bracket, and keep winning while the tournament cuts everyone else down. And Mexico has the kind of story that makes people believe they could go far. For decades, Mexico has carried one of the most painful patterns in World Cup football. The team was often good enough to escape the group stage, but then the same wall kept appearing. From 1994 to 2018, Mexico kept reaching the round of 16 and falling there. Again and again, the fifth match became the dream that never arrived. Then 2022 made the wound worse. Mexico did not even get out of the group, so a deep run in 2026 would not feel like a normal surprise. It would feel like a country breaking a curse on home soil. And Mexico's home soil can become a weapon. Mexico City Stadium, known around the world as Estadio Azteca, is one of the most famous football stadiums on the planet. It has hosted World Cup history before. It sits more than 7,300 feet above sea level, where the air can punish teams that are not used to it. Guadalajara also sits high, at more than 5,000 feet. That does not guarantee Mexico anything, but in a World Cup, small edges can become huge. A tired defender reacts 1 second late. A visiting team struggles to breathe in the final minutes. That is the Mexico side of the prophecy. Then there is Portugal. Portugal enters this tournament with a completely different kind of weight. It is not about home soil, it is about one last missing piece. Cristiano Ronaldo is 41. This is his 6th World Cup. He has won the Champions League. He has won league titles. He has won the European Championship with Portugal. He has scored more international goals than any other male player in history. He has built one of the most famous careers football has ever seen. But the World Cup is still missing. That is what makes Portugal dangerous. This is not just another tournament for them. It carries the feeling of a final chase. Ronaldo is no longer the young winger who ran at defenders with wild speed. He is no longer the player beginning his story. He is the legend trying to close the one gap that still remains. And Portugal is not depending on emotion alone. The squad around him is strong enough to make the dream feel real. Bruno Fernandes can create chances and score from midfield. Bernardo Silva can slow the game down, control the ball, and make the right pass when everyone else is rushing. Rafael Leao brings speed and danger on the wing. Vitinha gives the midfield energy and control. Portugal has players who can change a game before the other team even understands where the danger is coming from. Their group also gives them a clear opening. Portugal is in Group K with DR Congo, Uzbekistan, and Colombia. Dr. Congo is back on the World Cup stage after more than 50 years away. Uzbekistan is hungry and dangerous because teams like that arrive with nothing to lose. Colombia has the quality to make any favorite uncomfortable, but Portugal still enters that group as the team everyone expects to chase first place. If Portugal gets through cleanly, the Ronaldo story grows louder, and the final stage is already waiting. The 2026 World Cup final will be played on July 19th at New York, New Jersey Stadium. If Mexico and Portugal make it that far, the old Simpsons scene will feel like one of the strangest football setups the show ever gave us. But the most unsettling part is not just the teams, it is what happened in the episode. The Simpsons did not give the match a peaceful ending. There was no clean celebration, no final whistle that settled everything, no captain lifting the trophy while the crowd cheered. The game fell apart before anyone could own the moment. The fans turned angry. The stadium lost control. The chaos spread through Springfield. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.